My name is Nora. I grew up learning to read faces before I learned to read books. In our house, weather didn't come from the sky. It came from my father. Clear one minute, dangerous the next. After my mother left, the rooms grew hollow, like the walls were waiting for someone to apologize. No one did. When I was 9, we moved north to Portland so my father could be closer to the community. He never called it a cult. To outsiders, it looked like meditation and poetry, chanting in living rooms that smelled like tea and sandalwood. Inside, it was hierarchy and obedience. The leader's word was law, and the closer you stood to him, by money or devotion, the closer you were to God. Questions were a kind of sin. Doubt was a door you weren't allowed to open. I learned early how to split myself in two, the girl who smiled in public and the one who counted the seconds until the car ride home. When my mother tried to see us, she was cast as the villain, the tempter, the danger, the reason we needed saving. Love, they said, was protection. Protection, I learned, could look a lot like a cage. By 13, I understood the rules so well, I stopped speaking them out loud. School was a formality. The real lessons were at the leader's house. Women keep their eyes down, girls become wives, heaven is earned by obedience. If you didn't have money to give, you gave your time, your labor, your silence. My father gave all three. The summer I turned 15, he told me we were attending a big gathering in Los Angeles, a conference for the faithful. I packed 2 dresses and a toothbrush. In the hotel lobby, he pointed to a man I had never met, older, confident, sitting alone with a coffee. "Go say hello," my father said. "He is a good man." I sat because that's what I had been trained to do. I stared at my hands because I had been trained not to look directly at men. He said he didn't want a long engagement. He said the leader thought we were a match. He said the right words in the right order, and by nightfall there was a spiritual ceremony, soft chants wrapped around hard decisions I was too young to make. No one pointed a weapon at me. They didn't have to. Fear had been living in my ribs for years, patient and persuasive. Saying yes felt like survival. The next morning the world had new rules. I was moved like luggage, first to a small apartment, then out of the country for months. I didn't speak the language there. I didn't know the streets. I learned to measure time by the sound of his keys in the door. When we returned to the States, a drive-through chapel in Nevada turned the spiritual into legal. All it took was a notarized letter from one parent. None of it required my voice. People think the worst part of a forced marriage is the ceremony. It isn't. It's the silence afterward, the way it fills your throat until there is no room left for yourself. I became 2 people again. The girl who nodded and the girl who kept a secret calendar inside her chest, circling days when the sky felt a fraction lighter. Portland's rain was different when I came back. Streets I'd once memorized were strange and glittering, like someone had moved the buildings a few inches to the left. I was 16 and pregnant and legally bound to a life I hadn't chosen. Strangers held doors for me and said, "Congratulations," as if the word could build a bridge over everything I'd lost. I didn't tell anyone about the nights, about the rules that changed with his moods, about the way control can wear a kind voice. I told myself I was doing what good girls do, keeping the family intact, pleasing God, earning safety. But safety never arrived, not the kind that lets your shoulders drop and your lungs fill. Sometimes the city would go quiet, 3 a.m., the hour when even sirens seemed to rest, and I'd stand by the window and look down at the wet asphalt. I'd imagine the ocean, miles away, breathing without permission. I'd imagine a different girl, one who could step outside her body and keep walking. People ask why I didn't run. The answer is simple. Where do you run when the world believes your prison is holy? Still, some mornings I felt a thin crack of light. In the grocery line, the cashier would slip me a coupon and wink. A nurse at the clinic would speak to me like I was older than my paperwork. A neighbor would set a paper bag of oranges by the door. Small things. Proof that the universe had not completely forgotten my name. I started writing notes on receipt paper and the backs of envelopes. Not the whole story, just fragments. The leader's ring is heavy. The chanting hides questions. The rain is honest because it doesn't pretend. I hid the scraps inside a shoebox beneath the sink. I told myself it was nothing. The morning after the wedding, the world was silent. No bells, no laughter, no music, just the sound of the ceiling fan spinning above my head. I woke up in a bed that wasn't mine, in a body that no longer felt like mine either. The sheets smelled of cologne and dust. The man next to me, my husband, was still asleep, his back turned. I stared at the wall and tried to remember how I got there. I couldn't. It was like I'd fallen out of my own life. He told me to smile when people saw us together. "You're my wife now," he said, his voice calm, practiced. I was 13. I nodded because nodding was the only safe language I knew. Every word felt dangerous. Every question felt like betrayal. He took me out of the country within weeks. The flight felt endless. Hours of metal hum and strangers' voices. When we landed, the air smelled of salt and smoke. I didn't speak the language. I didn't even know where we were. He told everyone I was his cousin. I stopped correcting him. It was easier to disappear than to explain why I existed. The apartment we stayed in was small. White walls, no pictures, no mirrors. I used to sit by the window for hours watching the street below. Children ran past holding school bags. Women carried bread, laughing with one another. The life outside looked loud, messy, alive. Inside, everything was quiet, like a paused film. At night, I'd hear the call to prayer echoing through the city. It was the only sound that reached me, the only thing that made me feel human for a few seconds. I'd close my eyes and pretend my mother could hear it too, wherever she was. Months passed like that. My body changed before I understood why. I thought I was sick, but when I told him, he smiled. "You're carrying a blessing," he said. I didn't feel blessed. I felt trapped inside something I didn't choose. We came back to the United States when I was 6 months pregnant. My father met us at the airport, his face full of pride, like he had accomplished something holy. "Now you are a real woman," he said, as if pain was proof of womanhood. I wanted to scream that I was still a child, that I wanted to go home, but the word home had already stopped meaning anything. He arranged a legal marriage in Nevada. A drive-through chapel, a man in a cheap suit stamping papers. My father's signature waiting. No one looked at me, not once. I was invisible even in the moment that would define my life. That night, I stood in front of the mirror of the motel bathroom. The fluorescent light buzzed, harsh and cold. I looked at my face, pale, swollen, eyes too old for 13. "This isn't me," I whispered. The mirror didn't answer. It just reflected a girl already fading from her own reflection. Days turned into patterns. Wake up, cook, clean, stay quiet. Be good. He said he loved me when I obeyed. When I didn't, he said I needed to learn. His love came with lessons that hurt. I started counting things. Cracks in the wall, tiles on the floor, steps between rooms. Numbers made me feel in control. If I could count, I could survive another day. Sometimes, I'd close my eyes and imagine another version of me walking somewhere else, free, older, whole. When I gave birth, the world went silent again, but it was different this time. The silence wasn't empty, it was sacred. Her cry broke it, high, sharp, alive. My daughter, tiny hands, fragile heartbeat. I held her against my chest and felt something new move inside me, something stronger than fear. He called her ours, but I knew she was mine. For the first time, I had something he couldn't take away. At night, when he slept, I'd whisper to her, "One day, we'll leave." I promise. It would take years to make that promise real. But that night, holding her, I believed it. And that belief, small as it was, became the first piece of freedom I ever owned. I used to think obedience would save me. If I followed every rule, kept my eyes down, my voice small, maybe the pain would pass me by. It didn't. It just learned my name. After the spiritual wedding, they handed me over like a package changing owners. The next morning, he took what he wanted, and something in me shut off like a light. I was pregnant before I had words for what had happened. He took me out of the country, somewhere I didn't speak the language. I learned how to be quiet in 2 tongues, his and my silence. By the time we came back to the Bay Area, I was 6 months along. We drove to Nevada and a stranger stamped a paper. That stamp didn't make me a wife. It made my childhood vanish. My daughter arrived when I was 16, and the world tilted. She was the first sound that didn't hurt. I told myself I would be good if it meant she could be free. I asked to go back to school. They told me a wife's classroom is a kitchen and a nursery. I nodded, like always. But a small refusal started breathing inside me. It began as a simple ache. I wanted to read without asking. I wanted to walk into a room without permission. I wanted to look a man in the eyes and not feel like lightning would strike me dead. One afternoon at the park, I watched kids my age carrying backpacks and laughing like the future weighed nothing. I went home and said, "I'm going back." They said, "Ask the Sheikh's wife." She said no, said school would make my husband feel small. I smiled, thanked her, and enrolled anyway. Fremont Adult School smelled like pencil shavings and second chances. I kept flashcards under the crib and studied while bottles cooled. I hid bus money inside my shoe. I failed, tried again, passed. My GED wasn't a diploma so much as he took the kids that summer so I could figure things out. When he called to say they weren't coming back, a scream rose in me that no one heard. I borrowed $800, flew out, brought them home, filed the papers. The system wasn't built for girls like me. It barely believed girls like me exist. Shelters turned me away. Lawyers said I was a child yesterday and a mother today, and they couldn't square the math. I learned the shapes of forms, the price of stamps, the exhaustion of waiting rooms. During one visit, he tried to throw me out of a moving car. My phone shattered on the street. The kids were crying in the back. I promised them, out loud, so the promise would bind me, that this would be the last time they saw me afraid of him. 3 years later, the divorce was final. The paper didn't fix me. It made fixing possible. Grief came after freedom, not before. I grieved the girl who never got to be 15. I grieved the mother who had to learn parenting inside a hurricane. Therapy gave me words for the fog: grooming, coercion, trafficking. The cult had called it God. The courts called it marriage. I called it theft. I kept studying, paralegal courses at night, county work by day. My mom and I tried again near the end. She helped with the kids as best she could. She was flawed and she loved me hard. When she died, I went back to class for her and for the girl I'd left behind. The more I learned, the more I saw. This isn't rare. It's hidden. Laws with pretty names make cages polite. Paper shields the men who take and the systems that look away. I started speaking. At meetings, in hearing rooms, on quiet stages where the microphone trembles a little. Every time I tell it, the story lets go of me and holds the air instead. I don't believe in tidy endings. I believe in doors. I believe in teaching my daughter to name a boundary and mean it. My son to measure strength by tenderness, not control. I still wake some nights with my heart sprinting. I make tea, breathe, put paint on a cheap canvas until color finds me. Then I sleep. If you're listening because you don't know what to call what happened to you, after the divorce, I thought freedom would feel like a sunrise. It didn't. It felt like standing in the middle of a quiet room, not knowing what to do with my hands. I had imagined that once the papers were signed, life would rush back in. Color, sound, safety. But trauma doesn't leave just because the abuser does. It lingers like smoke in the walls. I worked 2 jobs for a while. Mornings at the county office, evenings washing dishes at a diner. Every paycheck was a small miracle. I'd trace the ink on my name, Nora A. Ruiz, just to remind myself it was real. Rent was always late, the fridge half empty, but the air in that tiny apartment was mine. For the first time in years, no one told me what to wear, what to say, what to believe. My daughter used to sit at the kitchen table drawing while I studied legal forms. "Are you going to be a lawyer, Mama?" she asked once. I told her I didn't know, but I kept reading. I wanted to understand how the world let what happened to me happen. Every law I studied was a window into my own past, words written by people who never had to live them. Therapy helped me start naming things. At first I couldn't say the word rape. It caught in my throat like broken glass. My therapist said, "You don't have to tell the story in order. Just start somewhere true." So I started with colors. The color of the hotel carpet the night I left. The color of my daughter's first blanket. The gray of court documents, stamped and dated, as if justice had a schedule. There were days I couldn't leave the bed. Triggers came from nowhere. A smell, a phrase, the sound of keys. But I learned to pause instead of collapse. Healing, I realized, is a skill no one teaches you. You have to invent it. A few years later, I started working as a paralegal. The courthouse hallways smelled like old paper and coffee. I watched other women come in, some trembling, some blank, as their stories got turned into case numbers. I saw myself in every one of them. I wanted to do more than file paperwork. I wanted to fight for the girls still inside the system that forgot. I began volunteering with a nonprofit that advocated against child marriage. When I told them my story, they didn't flinch. They said, "Tell it again." And I did, first shaking, then steady. The first time I spoke publicly, my hands were cold and damp. But afterward, a woman came up to me crying. She said, "That was me too." That was the moment I understood. Telling isn't reliving, it's reclaiming. Some nights, when I prepare for a hearing, I look at myself in the mirror of the courthouse restroom. White shirt, black skirt, red cardigan. My hair pinned back tight. I look like the version of womanhood they once tried to build me into. Obedient, respectable. But this time, the choices are mine. I wear red because it used to be forbidden. I speak loudly because silence was once survival. My children grew up watching me rebuild. They saw bills go unpaid, dinners skipped, tears hidden behind bathroom doors. But they also saw laughter come back like spring. My daughter studies fashion now. She says she wants to design clothes that feel like armor and air at the same time. My son builds security systems. He says he wants people to feel safe. Maybe healing becomes hereditary if you let it. Sometimes I visit the ocean again, the same place where I once prayed for a way out. I stand at the edge and breathe in the salt, the wind, the distance. I think about the girl who thought love meant obedience. I whisper to her, "You did it. You got out." She never answers, but I feel her there, quiet and free somewhere inside me. People ask if I forgive him. I say I forgave myself first. For staying, for believing, for surviving in the only way I knew. The rest is just echo. Freedom isn't loud. It's not fireworks or applause. It's quiet. The first thing I noticed on stage wasn't the lights or the crowd. It was the thud of my heartbeat in the microphone. A soft, living drum under the hush. The blue dress I'd ironed twice felt like armor, too thin to stop the old weather that sometimes blows through me without warning. I wrapped my fingers around the stand to steady them and let the room settle. "My name is Nora," I said, and the name felt like a small, lit house I could finally step into. When I was 15, I was married to a man nearly twice my age. No gasp. Just stillness, respectful and heavy. I could make out shapes in the first row, a teacher with ink on her fingers, a teenage girl twisting the sleeve of her hoodie, an older woman with a jaw set like stone but eyes made of water. I told them what I had come to tell and what I had made peace with never saying, both at once. I told them about the rules that arrived before puberty, the way I learned to erase my questions, the way adults said obedience as if it were oxygen. I told them about a hotel coffee shop where I stared at my hands and a stranger's voice decided my future, about a spiritual ceremony that was a door with no handle on my side, about the first night he didn't wait, about leaving the country pregnant, coming back legally married and legally erased. My voice did not shake. That's something people misunderstand about survivors. Strength isn't the absence of tremor. It's the decision to speak while trembling anyway. I told them how I mothered before I finished being a child, how I learned prices, bus routes, recipes, the precise length of a silence that meant danger, how I counted money in the bathroom with the faucet running, because secrecy also needed water. Then I told them how I left, not like in movies, not as a single cinematic sprint, but as a long, stubborn series of inches. Night classes, a GED, a first paycheck that felt unreal in my palm, the ring coming off like a thorn working its way out at last. The summer he kept the kids, the phone thrown from the car, the affidavit signed with a hand that wouldn't stop buzzing, the door I closed behind me that never opened again. I paused and let the air breathe. Healing, I said, isn't a finish line. It's a rhythm. Wake up, breathe, tell the truth, repeat. I told them about group rooms with folding chairs and lukewarm coffee where nobody tried to fix me and the not fixing fixed me. About painting when words were too sharp. About colors that bled into each other like apology. The applause didn't come right away. Instead, there was a long, living silence that felt like the ocean taking a breath. Then a single pair of hands, then many. I felt the room stand up around me, and something unlatched in my chest. Not grief this time, not rage, but relief, bright and clean as winter sun. Afterward, they came in a river. A woman with a courthouse badge who whispered, "I see cases that sound like yours, and I needed your voice to remember they're not files." A college student who said she hadn't slept in 3 nights because her boyfriend had started counting her steps. A grandmother who pressed a warm peppermint into my hand for courage later. I held their stories like fragile birds and watched them fly back to their owners, lighter. When the hall emptied, I stayed on stage alone. The mic smelled faintly of metal and mint gum. I said my name again, just to hear it ring in the rafters. Names are spells when you've lived unnamed. At home, I folded the blue dress over the chair. The city hummed, tires sighing on wet streets, a siren far away, a neighbor's laugh like a quick spark. On my desk lay an envelope from a senator's office, a request for testimony on a bill to end child marriage in our state. I thought of the girl with the hoodie sleeves, the grandmother's peppermint, the courthouse badge. I thought of my daughter ordering fabric swatches, my son debugging code at midnight, both of them building lives nobody chose for them but them. I lit a candle, not for ritual, but for witness. I wrote until the wax pooled at the base, testimony that was not just mine, statistics and statutes stitched to a beating narrative. I wrote about loopholes you could drive a van through,